I want us to think about a new way, a different way of faith. I'm a pastor, that's what I do. And it's still odd hearing myself introduced as a pastor. My wife's family growing up, they said, marry anyone you want, marry for love, but don't marry a pastor. And I remember calling my mom and telling her I'm thinking about going into ministry. She cried on the phone and said, you're going to be so poor. And she wasn't wrong. But this really, it wasn't the plan. I didn't grow up religious. I certainly didn't go to college thinking I'm going to go and be in ministry. But there was this experience late in high school. And I would say I encountered God. I encountered the sacred. And I thought, because I was led to believe, that this was like a single decisive binary change. I went from being one way to being another, from non-religious to religious, non-Christian to Christian, lost to saved. We wrapped all this language around this. I had a religious experience. I was converted, and I tried to live for a while in this very static state, as if I had arrived. I knew the truth. I knew the answers. I knew what the Bible said. I had the single way and morality. And so I did what you do. I separated myself from my non-religious friends. I started to repress these parts of me, even really good, life-giving parts of me, just because they didn't fit with this hyper-religious identity. And I would even say and do things that I didn't actually believe in the hopes that I would come to feel the belief. This was like fake it till you make it sort of faith. And then I came here and I started studying religion at Stetson, actually in this building. I had a course with Don Musser, Intro to Christianity, and he started challenging me on things like free will and predestination and the power of God and the agency of God, and my world crumbled. I had like this breakdown. He sent me to the counseling center, and I had to start and try to like work it out, but it ended up being great, and he started to mentor me, encourage me to go on and study. So I went to graduate school and studied theology, and I learned to study the Bible academically and incorporate intellect and reason into my faith. I looked at church history. And what I realized is that that faith I'd inherited in high school didn't hold up. But the more that I deconstructed my faith, the more I broke it open and let it fall apart and then came back to it and started picking up the pieces and putting it back together, I found more passion and energy and life in my faith than I ever had before, and I've continued to discover this faith that I'm more and more willing to give my life to. And I realized what I had converted to was actually conversion itself, ongoing transformation, not certainty but mystery. And it was so powerful. I realized it wasn't threatening to faith. This was actually faith itself. And I've learned that that experience was not unique either. I've come to know so many people for whom the dominant religious landscape just isn't working. And it's not that it's bad, it's not that it's wrong, it just doesn't fit. And statistics actually bear this out. 1 in 4, 28% of adults have left the faith that they were raised in. And a similar number between 18 and 29-year-olds are just moving further and further away from organized religion altogether. But I've come to believe in the last 10 years, especially the last 7 years, when I've been experimenting with and starting new alternative faith communities, that there's a different way. And again, it's not better, it's not the right way, it's certainly not the final way, but a different way. And I want to talk about that different way of faith, not just the next evolution in faith, but actually embracing evolution itself as an expression of faith. I want to do that by looking briefly at religious history, which for me is Christian history. I want to lay that over top of evolutionary theory, then come back around to the arts, because I think they have a lot to say about how we move forward, and then just leave you with a few tangible examples of what this might look like. I was told last week, you can't be a Christian and believe in evolution. This is troubling, as I am here advocating evolution as an expression of faith. So maybe there's a chilly draft in hell somewhere, or maybe people whisper heresy or blasphemy, which is fine. I've gotten comfortable with the whispers. But the truth is, as much as I like to see myself as this innovator, really pushing these boundaries, or even just working out why my faith has evolved the way it has, the reality is this is not new. Evolution is written into religious history, and again, I can only speak with authority about my context, which is the Christian faith, but I've been told as much, I've intimated as much from my friends who are Jewish and Muslim and Baha'i and Buddhist. But if we just take my faith tradition, for example, I think evolution is written into the Bible. I think it's written into the Christian history and Christian orthodoxy. And just, superficially, we have evolved in terms of the cultural expression. What's considered sacred. We've gone from cathedrals to, a few years ago, my friends and I started a church in a bar downtown. We've evolved in terms of what we consider to be sacred music, from organ music to now, rock bands and laser light shows. We've evolved with technology. You used to get your sermon from a pulpit. Now you can get it on a podcast. You used to give your offering when they passed the plate. Now you can give it on PayPal. And these are superficial examples, but there's a little bit, there are these deeper shifts in evolutions. Boundaries have been evolving from the beginning. Jesus had very little trouble bending, if not flat out breaking, long-standing religious traditions for the sake of including the marginalized and the sinner and the outcast and even people of other faiths altogether. And the early church continued this. They incorporated people into this new faith regardless. They didn't make them get circumcised, didn't make them adhere to these ritual purity codes and dietary laws. But I think the most profound evolution has been in interpretation. Interpretation is the way that we make sense of, that we find meaning in our sacred experiences, our sacred texts, our sacred traditions. And interpretations have been evolving. We've evolved in what we thought about slavery, what we thought about women in ministry, finally, recently, about the LGBTQ community, thank God. We've loosened our evolutionary interpretations here regarding things as trivial as shellfish, stuff potentially as offensive as dancing, I know, keep your seats. And even my favorite, about alcohol, right? Thank God, again. And it's interesting, even interpretation itself has evolved. The field of hermeneutics, how we interpret, has evolved over the years. What we think about the Bible has evolved over the years. Just this week, there was a New Testament released. And so this is the original New Testament, but then there's 10 additional books that were more recently discovered that more fully round out the literature of the New Testament. There are countless examples of the way that faith has evolved, and it breaks down these boundaries of ritualism and tribalism and moralism and chauvinism and fundamentalism. And the reason it can do this is because woven into the very fabric of faith is the truth that it's always changing. It's never finished. It's always adapting. I had the opportunity in high school to partake in a pilot program called the Integrated Sciences. Brilliant idea. Instead of learning one science per year, biology, chemistry, physics, instead they said, let's just do this mishmash, all the sciences, all the time for 4 years. So I played Tetris on my graphing calculator for 4 years, learned nothing. I turned in, my senior year, I kid you not, I turned in an alphabet book. A is for atom, and I drew a circle because I didn't know what an atom looked like, and then I made up a paragraph about what an atom was. So I have absolutely no authority with which to talk to you about the sciences, but I have friends who are much smarter than me who do this kind of thing. One of them blogged recently about the nature of change and about evolutionary theory, and he says it's sort of broadly seen as happening either slow, incremental, bit by bit over a long period of time. This is called gradualism, or things are basically the same most of the time. And then every now and again, there's a major event that causes like a seismic shift, and things change rapidly just as long as it takes until it reaches equilibrium. This is called punctuated equilibrium. And as interesting as this is in and of itself, when you lay Christian history back over this, it becomes very interesting. In her book, The Great Emergence, the author Phyllis Tickle, who has an amazing name, Phyllis Tickle, I love it, she says, about every 500 years, the church goes through a major shift, a major evolution, this massive change. And so in the year 500, this was the great fall of the Roman Empire. In the year 1000, this is the great schism. It splits the church into East and West. In 1500, you have the Great Reformation with Martin Luther and the church. And if you're good with patterns, that means we're right on schedule to be in the middle of another major change. And don't get me wrong, I'm into that. That sounds really good. I'm happy to represent the Christian faith in whatever evolution comes next, in whatever the next thing is that emerges, but I can't help but wonder, what about after that? So then do we just settle into that for another 500 years? And furthermore, what about my friends who are parts of other faith traditions and religions? What about their progress? And maybe I'm just impatient, but I don't have another 500 years. And I don't think you do either. And so I wonder if instead of a single punctuated shift, we might actually embrace sustained evolution, ongoing change as an expression of faith. Absolutely refuse to wait for the 500-year itch and actually go for it ourselves. I think faith can become a site of regular, ongoing change and transformation rather than simply defending and reinforcing the comfort of equilibrium. I think faith could be the place where we provide catalysts for change and we provide space for that adaptation to take place, and that could become a beautiful practice of our faith. Part of the reason I think we get locked up in equilibrium for centuries at a time is this preoccupation with certainty. Have we got the truth? Do we have the right answer? Can we be sure? Are we certain? It's interesting because it's been said that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is actually certainty. Because the moment you're certain, you no longer need to exercise any faith. I think for me, this is why I think the arts have so much to say about how we move forward, because they're not preoccupied with certainty. They don't need the right answer or only a single way of doing something. The arts are about expression. They're about experience. They're creative. They're engaging. They tell us a story and draw us into it. They move us. I have a friend who recently gave a lecture, sort of a brief art history lesson, 200 years, and sort of carried us from classicism to realism and neo-impressionism and cubism and the New York School. And I'm listening to this, and the sort of wrap-up is the idea that these things are different. They're all evolving, but they're all art. And it sort of hit me, and I thought, wait a minute, we not only we expect that art is going to evolve, right? We don't see the Sistine Chapel and say, we don't need another chapel. That's done, that's beautiful. We don't see the Mona Lisa and say, we're done with paintings. No more paintings, we don't need to paint any women, right? Nor do we assume that everything henceforth is just going to be a cheap knockoff of the Sistine Chapel. It's not just going to be a carbon copy of the Mona Lisa. No, we know that art is going to keep evolving. People will keep expressing, they'll be creative, they'll experiment with new techniques, and yet an entire generation has been pushed away from organized religion because it's come to mean finished. Organized means done. It's closed. No one needs to paint anymore. And so their God-given impulse, maybe your God-given impulse to paint a fresh expression of faith hasn't fit that carbon copy against which religion is measuring fidelity. But I think if, like art, faith were encouraged to evolve, we would return to, we would nod to, we would often come around to the things that have inspired the very best of the artists and traditions that have come before us, not so we could copy them, not for some cheap replica, but so that we could be inspired to paint ourselves the next version, the next expression, the next evolution. TV and film have evolved as well. We've gone from watching characters through an invisible fourth wall, which places them in another space and another time, to then characters breaking the fourth wall, and they speak directly to the audience or directly to the camera. And they create this powerful sense of intimacy. To now, we've got reality TV where there's supposedly no walls, and we're just watching interesting lives unfold. And there's this term used in the theater and in film, the fifth wall, and it's come to define the separation between critic and actor or practitioner. And it's interesting to me, as someone who feels drawn to create faith communities, among those who feel critical of or criticized by religion, the cynics, the skeptics, this has really come to define our generation. We're postmodern, we're post-Christian, we're spiritual, but decidedly not religious. And so we've built a very clear wall. The issue is it's not beneficial for people on either side. On one side, you've got a critic who's separated from a potentially valuable experience that could shape and hone their criticism. On the other side, you've got practitioners of faith who are insulated from maybe a valuable critique that could shape and hone their faith. And I think this has robbed us of imagination about what the future of faith could be, but I think we can break that fourth wall, the preconceptions and assumptions on both sides. And when the fifth wall comes down, the actors spill into the audience. The crowd and the critics come onto the stage, and everybody becomes an important character in the drama of faith. Everybody gets to challenge the script that's been handed to us, potentially become a writer themselves. We can edit the drama of faith in real time. This makes us all actors in the improv of faith, and it moves us out of the comfort of equilibrium into a tenuous but very exciting place of evolution. So what did this look like practically? Just a few examples. This fifth wall, in addition to separating critic from practitioner or actor, it's also come to speak of the division between members in the audience, people who share an experience. And for far too long, to be faithful has meant that we sit as individuals, we consume whatever comes from the stage or the platform or the book or the guru. And so maybe the starting point is reclaiming the value of conversation. That we're not just individuals who either accept or deny something, but we have the ability to turn to the person next to us. There is no fifth wall. We can engage the content together. We need to reclaim that dialogue, not just with religious authorities, but with our peers, with the person next to us. I've started recently another experimental faith community in DeLand called Collective. We've had some considerable success with what I would call threshold faith environments. And the aim is to take people who are absolutely burned out on religion, have a foot out the door, and then those who are decidedly outside of faith altogether and very hesitant to come in. And we put them in conversation with each other and trust them. And it's amazing what happens, how powerful and transformative that can be. And so we have atheists who are persuading jaded religious folks to keep the faith. And we have these hate religion, never going back to church people who are helping atheists and agnostics to find value and meaning in faith and in faith community. And finally, one of my great influences, Peter Rollins. We actually had him here. He gave a lecture about a year and a half ago here in this room. He's a philosopher and theologian. And he takes this criticism as a part of faith to its logical conclusion. He and his community, for the 40 days leading up to Easter, practice what he calls atheism for Lent. They read every day the very best criticism of the best atheists, Dawkins, Harris, E.O. Wilson, Singer. They read this as a way of prompting self-reflection. Can I see myself through the eyes of my greatest critic? Can I ask, where is the truth in this? How does this prompt me to change the way that I practice my faith? There are countless other ways that this sort of evolution can be prompted and engaged, but we need labs, we need places to experiment, and we need brave people to do it. Rob Bell, in his book Velvet Elvis, he contrasts faith as a wall with faith as a trampoline. He says, as a wall, faith is rigid, it's built with block, it's solid, it's threatened by movement, it divides things, it's propped up, and a wall is defended. A trampoline, on the other hand, it flexes, it bends, it springs, it absorbs the life, the energy, the weight of whatever comes in contact with it. A trampoline is not defended. You invite people you love to jump with you on a trampoline. Beautiful imagery. And I think, for me, I've come to believe that faith is not most powerful and most alive in certainty and in equilibrium, but instead in the tension between practice and critique, in the flex between belief and doubt, in the bend between emotion and intellect, and in that thin space between the past and the future, where those boundaries disappear and we're actually participating in evolving and becoming. My friends and I have found that is where faith is most alive. I think there's plenty of room on that trampoline, and I hope that we can jump into the future of faith together. Thank you.